Hello, Steeler Nation, and welcome to your SteelerNation.com podcast. I'm your host, G.Stryker, and today we are again blessed to have our favorite sports writer come in from Homistek.com, Hunter Homistek. Hunter, how you doing, man?
Favorite sports writer.
Yeah,
High praise right off the jump, man. I'm doing really well, really well after that intro. Thank you for the ego boost. That's going to carry me through the week, dude.
No worries. I know we're talking personally. We got stuff going on in our lives right now. I just got a new puppy. It was on the promo vid yesterday. It's a little Vizsla puppy. A couple people have been asking. Her name is Liza, and she is 9 weeks old and just starting to almost pee outside. So it's going really well for us now.
Almost. Listen, we got our first dog about 3 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
German Shepherd. So I understand the struggle of getting them to pee outside. And she still once in a while has accidents because she's that stubborn, will get mad at you and go pee on the rug.
Oh, geez. Always.
She's way too smart, man. She's way too smart and way too savage with it.
That's great. Well, Steeler Nation, welcome to the podcast. Like we're saying, Hunter as well. And the first thing I just wanted to talk about quickly is we do have a promotion going on out on our Instagram page at SteelerNation.com. If it's going on until tomorrow, it's a autograph, authentic Minkah Fitzpatrick jersey. If you are following SteelerNation.com as well as Total Sports Entertainment and you tag 3 friends, you are automatically entered. So good luck, Steeler Nation. Get this awesome jersey, all thanks to Total Sports Entertainment and Steeler Nation, of course, SteelerNation.com.
Oh, that's killer.
Yeah, I actually entered too. So
that's cheating, man. Come on, you can't
well,
do
it's
that.
not cheating, but yeah, I know if I win, I'll be like,
I'm
like,
glad.
oh, it's fixed.
Yeah.
I've actually been entering for all of them, so I haven't won yet. So it's
Nice. Well,
not cheating yet.
It's not rigged. I'm glad it's not rigged, and I'm glad that we can see that Minkah is keeping 39 moving forward too. So that's cool. So everybody who already got one, still in style.
Great call. Great call.
Absolutely.
And here's a link that I'm sharing too. It's from Antonio Brown's Twitter. Turns out yesterday he just announced that he is retiring. He wrote specifically at this point, the risk is greater than the reward. Thank you, everyone who's been a part of this journey. I sincerely thank you for everything. Life goes on. 84.
Man, hang on, Stryker. I got something for you.
All righty.
2 seconds, people. It'll be worth it. Hang on.
That's why we have the visuals. This is what makes the show fun for our YouTube subscribers. Uh-oh. Oh, he's got it. 84 jersey. Oh.
Listen, AB's the man. I will fight anybody who disagrees.
I tell you one thing, he was the best receiver I've ever seen play outside of Jerry Rice. I'm disappointed that his career's cut short. Kind of the way that he's talking about it here, saying that the risk is greater than the reward. I think COVID-19 is probably playing a factor into this. But what are your thoughts on that, Hunter?
Yeah, I think for sure COVID is playing a part. And as we've seen so many other players obviously tweeting the hashtag we want to play and egging the NFL on to kind of get their crap together and really figure out a plan that's going to keep them safe and let them have a season. But AB, I think, also understands, the CTE head injury side of things at this point as well. He's not getting younger, obviously, taking these years, well, not even voluntarily taking the years off, but sitting these years out. So he's not getting younger. Yeah. He was always, thanks to his work ethic, though, he was an incredibly reliable and not injury-prone player. His body held up extremely well despite touching the ball 8,000 times a season and getting hit 8,000 times a season. His body always held up.
Yeah, it did.
And I don't think his work ethic is going to slide. If somebody wanted to give him a chance, I would feel very comfortable putting Antonio Brown back out on the field. The question all comes down to all the off-field stuff. How's his mind holding up? Where is he at just personally and mentally right now? He's been pretty quiet, though, over the last, however many months. You haven't heard a whole lot from him. I don't know. I saw did he officially get engaged to Chelsea? I feel like something happened there.
Yeah, I did not see that exactly. The only thing I know is he just dropped a video for his new album. So I know that's up. That might be a reason why this promotion is going on at the same time, because he'll get a lot of hits.
Makes a lot of sense
for it. So, but I mean, he's got a career. He's got other things he can do. So he's moving on, as good old Emperor Noel used to say, getting on with his life's work. So best to him. And if he never comes back, I hope he has a good life outside of that. I hope he gets his life together. I know part of the last ruling he had in court was he's under probation for the next 2 years. So that'll at least help out, hopefully, with any if he was doing any alternative things, because they test you for illicit substances.
For sure. I mean, it's a shame whenever you think about AB's career, what it could have been versus what it is now. I think what people are going to remember now is the way it fell off, the way it just completely imploded. A lot of that was absolutely started and Antonio's fault, no doubt that it was a lot of self-inflicted wounds going on there. But, man, you just can't deny the player he was. As far as watching him on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays, as spectacular a player as I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, and what he did in a short amount of time, too. He was close to breaking all of the Steelers' records. He would have had yardage, last year if he was still on the team, and probably would have broke the receptions record this year, for both held by Hines Ward right now, and then probably broke the touchdowns record, receiving touchdowns record as well, Hines. But Hines, my boy, still has all three of those records. Still has most receptions, most yardage, and most touchdowns by a Steeler receiver. So props to Hines as well. I've got my jersey upstairs, but I won't put it on pause to run up and grab it yet.
I came somewhat prepared. I had that thing stashed close by.
Nice. But let's talk about here. We've got another receiver we're talking about, and I'm rolling over to Brian Batko's Twitter, and he's telling us about Ryan Switzer. So he tweeted out yesterday that Ryan Switzer on Instagram Live says he's the best shape of his life at 177 pounds. I believe I will be one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. I have no doubt I'll be up there, and talked about like Edelman is, like Welker was, like Jamison Crowder, Cole Beasley. So that's big statement from Ryan Switzer, who had a terrible year last year by his standards, or by anyone's standards, barely any production outside of special teams. I mean, he's obviously very good on special teams, but what's the statement say to you?
Confidence. That's the first thing I take away from this. I mean, every pro athlete is going to say something like that. Anybody in any walk of life that is at the highest level, which, don't get it twisted, you guys can make Ryan Switzer jokes all you want. He's in the NFL, which the smallest of small percentages of people will ever be able to say. And he's not just in the NFL, but he's stuck at the NFL level for several years now. So he is a super high caliber athlete. And I love the trash talk on Twitter and everything. But there's definitely a part of me that I roll my eyes when I see it, because talking crap on any athlete at that level is just, it's so silly to me. When you get to be around these guys and see the way they prepare and understand their mentality, what they put their bodies through to get and sustain at that level, Ryan Switzer's incredible. And to diminish that is just silly to me. So I love seeing the confidence. And I also love how his list gets more realistic as it goes, like Edelman, Welker, Crowder, and then it's like Cole Beasley. It's like, all right, Cole Beasley, I can maybe, right?
It's like walking into a department store and all like the $1,000 objects are right there when you're walking in. It's like, I wear like a handbag store. I'm not buying that $5,000 handbag. Hey, this one over here is $500. Okay, that's way more inexpensive.
Right. It's
here
like
you go, honey.
It's like me saying, in 10 years, I'm going to be driving a Ferrari. All right, maybe a Ford Fusion. I don't know, like something. But it's like,
but it'll have 4 wheels. I'm telling you that it's going to have 4 wheels.
Right. But I mean, I like it. And the other thing that I take away from that statement, 177, man, that's tiny. He's already a tiny guy. Like, that's light. I worry about how his body, because he struggled with injuries last year.
Yeah.
And I wonder how his body's going to hold up. Maybe being a little lighter will help in some ways. Like, I understand he has a small frame. He's a very small guy. I don't know what he's listed at, maybe 5'10".
Yeah.
But
and I think he's actually under 5'10".
I guarantee.
I'll look that up quickly while we're talking.
I mean, I saw him numerous times, talked to him numerous times last year, stood beside him. He is not 5'10". He's a very small guy, and 177 for his frame is pretty good. I think that might be kind of a healthy weight, help take some pressure off his joints and everything. You see guys bulk up too much and start getting injury problems because their frame, their joints and knees and everything can't support that extra weight. So maybe this will be good for him. I'm still, look, I kind of pull for Switzer, man. The hate he gets is unjustified, in my opinion. Like you said, he was very good on special teams. I think in 2018 he was like 7th and
played them all too. He played every single special teams pretty much, and And for his size too, just to let you know quickly, he's actually listed as 5'8", 185. So he did lose some weight. He's probably a bit faster now, but it's probably also muscle weight. Like, I mean, not that NFL athletes that we know that if you're a receiver, you're pretty much cut and you've got low body fat as is. Sure. So don't know where exactly that 177 pounds is compared to his listed 185, but it'll be interesting to see, especially with Ben throwing him the ball too, and Ben knows how to find him.
I agree completely. And one thing that he is going to struggle with this year is simply finding the field. Yeah. I mean, that wide receiver core is pretty stacked this season. I feel like he is the 5th receiver at best. So that's going to be a challenge in and of itself, unless he can truly separate. If he shows up to camp and is just this, Julian Edelman slot receiver that he says, then obviously he's going to be on the field. But until he proves that, he's going to have a tough path back to the field at all. He's going to have to continue on special teams, which it's a tough job, man. For every 10 Ryan Switzers, there's a Devin Hester. Like, Devin Hester is super unique. I don't know what people think is going to happen, like what they expect out of their kick and punt returners, but Ryan Switzer is totally acceptable at that job. And he's kind of what you expect: safe, reliable. You just want guys who are not going to cough the ball up and make mistakes on special teams. If you get a Devin Hester, obviously that's a huge bonus, but they're more than a little rare. So Switzer is acceptable.
And Steelers already have an all-pro punt returner right now anyway, because Deontay Johnson made second team all-pro, which everybody forgets. They had that big punt return for a touchdown late in the season and had big numbers just returning the ball. As you get later in the year, obviously, to me, it's always easier to return the ball because the ball's not going to travel as high or as long. And especially in these cold weather locations, like our entire division, they're going to have some shorter balls and get better returns. And that's what happened at the end of the season. And that's how, DJ essentially stole a spot as an all pro. And that's huge. He didn't make the Pro Bowl, but he's second team all pro.
Right. The concern there, of course, being if he continues developing as a receiver, do you want him back there? Kind of like this guy, Antonio Brown, obviously amazing at returning punts, but he became so valuable as a receiver that it was like, maybe probably don't go back there now.
They kept him back there for a long time.
They did.
It took a while, and that they took him off a kickoff. He was doing kickoff and punt return, and he was just strictly punt return. And when you're coming down to punt return, you've got situational punts. If it's inside the 20, it's not going to be a return anyway. He's just trying to secure the football.
Right.
And then if it's outside of the 20, he's got a chance at a return. So now it's like, that's why AB was on the field for they weren't going to set him up for getting slammed and getting killed like on those tweener ones. But yeah, if it's going to be a long kick or if it's going to be a short kick, it worked out fine because of how they used AB properly. And I honestly see them doing that with DJ this year to see how he does.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. He needs to stay back there. Like you said, an all-pro special teamer. I mean, you got to stick with that, reward that, let him know, that's appreciated. And if he likes to do it, which I assume he does, let him do it. I mean, dude's earned it. He's dynamic with the football in his hands. We saw that, receiving the ball, kick returns, get him the ball by any means possible, in my opinion.
Yeah. Nice. And we got some Bud Dupree news. Over here, we got he did not sign a new contract with the Steelers, and that means that he is stuck to playing on the tender. So CJ Lester, our sports writer, let us know about that on SteelerNation.com. So now he has to play under the franchise tag. Now, the interesting thing is, which we discussed a little bit before in an earlier podcast, I think, Hunter, and that was, will that franchise tag be as a linebacker or as a defensive end, as Justin McGonigal reported to us? So do you think he's going to win his arbitration to be listed as a, defensive lineman as opposed to a linebacker?
Yeah, I think kind of the basis for this is what Judon did in Baltimore, and they kind of met somewhere in the middle, right? They said, we'll give you a little bump. We're not going to pay you completely as a defensive end, but we understand that you're not a pure linebacker either. And I feel like there's got to be an edge designation at some point coming, right? Just to avoid this altogether. I mean, if you just add a new category and call it edge and it's somewhere in the middle, that's what all these guys are. So there's no doubt that he would qualify as that. But what's so weird to me is that Bud Dupree is like, clearly, if you just ask somebody, what position does Bud Dupree say? Literally nobody's going to say he's a defensive end. It's like, it's not until you watch the tape that you kind of nah, all right. Like I can make that case
Yeah.
because he's rushing so often, but nobody like depth chart on Madden when he was drafted, he's a linebacker. Like that's just what everybody has called him forever. He's a linebacker.
Yeah.
And I think somebody did some research I saw on Twitter and said that 60% of the snaps he essentially played defensive end. So the majority of the time he is rushing the passer, rushing, and I don't know, man. I understand where he's coming from. Listen, I don't think this is any slight on Bud at all. If I was in Bud's position, I'd be doing the same thing, especially with, Shaq Barrett doing it, Judon doing it.
Yeah.
Do it. I mean, you deserve that extra money. Go get it. There's no problem with that. There's no doubt in my mind that the Steelers are going to try to pretend that he's a linebacker, right? But everybody knows, man, like he's a pass rusher. He's an edge rusher. Like I said, I could see that designation coming into play at some point. If they just add it, make the pay somewhere in between, all these guys would be fine with that, I think.
Yeah, I think edge, you hit the nail on the head. Edge is the best way to say it because he's not really a true defensive end because he doesn't line up inside of the tackles. He's always lining up outside of the tackles because he needs that angle to beat with this to beat tackles with speed and with positioning. And then of course he really improved his hand mechanics last year. So to call it an edge position would be the way to fix it for the entire league. But currently, I don't see him as being able to be called a defensive end because he's not lining up inside of the tackles, rarely, as I should say, and even straight up on a tackle. Right. Sometimes he'll line up straight up on a tackle. He's never lining up to the inside of a tackle.
For sure.
They're always on the edge. So like you're saying, that's the best way to list them.
Absolutely, man. And I think the Steelers I don't know if they started this, like I would have to check historically, but I feel like whenever they started calling Cam Hayward a defensive tackle, that kind of opened up the same can of worms because if you watch the tape, Cam Hayward is the defensive end in the 3-4 set. It's like, but I understand because he does line up on the interior of the defensive line a lot, so they could get away with that. And then he can make the Pro Bowl, get his all-pro selections as a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
It's the same can of worms. I mean, it's literally just nomenclature at this point. We understand what role they play in the defense. It's just what you want to call it, how much that commands on the market causes a problem in a franchise tag situation like this. So I mean, the edge is truly the only easy answer unless they just want to file a grievance every time and then meet in the middle, which accomplishes the same thing, really. So I don't think it matters. And I don't even think Bud is sweating it at all. Like, I don't think Bud's sitting back like, oh, they need to pay me. I think he just recognizes that there's $1.5 million on the table and it's going to be easy to get. So he's going to go get it.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. And moving on to more Steeler news, we've got Christian Scott Williamson, and he was a player that I loved and always was very, very excited about his potential. Huge guy, 6'9", 270s, played rugby over in for the Worcester Warriors in England. Steelers brought him in as a developmental player. They got roster exemptions for him being on the practice squad because he was a developmental player. So the Steelers were carrying 11 players instead of 10, like for the rest of the league or most of the league that didn't have an international player on a practice squad. So he had an easy fit from all accounts. I mean, I always read the diary reports from Alex Kazora over at Steeler Depot. He does an awesome job of writing down exactly what's happening day to day in Steeler practices. And unfortunately, he's not going to be there this year, but he was listing last year as Christian Scotland Williamson is having a really improved camp last year. He was really starting to get the blocking because as a rugby player, you don't know how to block. And he had to be taught how to block and how to use his size and get down for leverage. And he's starting to pop, and then he ended up getting hurt right there, I think in the second preseason game, and then that kind of scuttled his chances and they put him back on the squad. So, I don't know your thoughts on this. And one other interesting thing was they kind of dropped him to pick up Dax Raymond, who is a 6'5", 252-pound linebacker from Chicago out of Utah State. This, in all intents and purposes, Dax Raymond to me seems just like a guy. He doesn't seem like he's going to make a push for the roster, whereas I thought Scotland Williamson, with his size and his athleticism, had a chance to develop into being like a third down, possible receiving threat tight end.
Yeah, his size is insanely intriguing. And again, seeing this guy in person, dude, he is a tank. He was a monster. When you see him, you're like, all right, this guy could make it at the NFL level just on his size alone. but he always had a rough road to making the team. I mean, the ask of that, it was a long shot, and everybody knew it was a long shot. It wasn't like they thought, okay, in 3 years, we really got something here. They're like, in 3 years, we may possibly, maybe have something here if everything aligns completely perfectly. Going from rugby to the NFL, dude, guys that play tight end their entire life and through D1 college don't make it in the NFL every year, so to think that you're going to put those skills together in 2 years, rugby is similar, but it's certainly not identical, and certainly not for a tight end. All the blocking and the route running that you're asking is not in rugby, of course. So he had a monster challenge ahead of him. And as you were saying, he did improve throughout camp last year, and that was very evident. I think everybody was excited about it. Coaches were excited about it. Christian himself was very excited about it. And he's one of the most cordial guys to talk to in the locker room. I'm going to miss that personally. He was just a joy to be around, honestly, and to talk with. His mentality was so good. He always understood, like, I'm not where I need to be yet. And he was not shy about saying that. Like, he always would talk about things. If you try to point out something he did well, he would immediately counter with the things he didn't do well. And like, that's where my focus is right now. So he's an intriguing guy, but I think anybody following the team always knew that this was kind of inevitable because it just wasn't there yet. I mean, hopefully another team will scoop him up and maybe he'll get another chance somewhere where the tight end group isn't as deep. Because suddenly the Steelers do have a really deep tight end room, even considering Zach Gentry and then Kevin Rader down the line. Scotland Williamson was realistically the number 5 receiver on my depth chart. So again, what were the Steelers going to do here? Maybe let him hang around a little bit throughout camp or whatever until you absolutely had to trim him. But I guess they like Dax Raymond better. And I'd be lying if I said I knew a whole lot about Dax at all. From what I read, he's more of a receiving tight end. So it seems like they're going that way with obviously Ebron coming in. Maybe they want somebody insurance if Ebron gets hurt, or I don't know what they're looking for with Dax. Just it's a dart throw, really. That's what it is. And that's what Williamson, Scotland Williamson was too. So it's not like Dax is going to make a push to be the number 1 tight end or anything, but they like his polish a little more than Christian.
Yeah, your dog agrees with you, and I do too. The Steelers were obviously trying to get their own Antonio Gates, another guy that was lucky enough to never play professional football, came into the league as a basketball player, turned into an all-pro tight end. So the athleticism was there, the size was there. It just didn't work out, unfortunately, and Steelers moving on. And you also mentioned a little bit earlier in our conversation today about the hashtag "We Want to Play." And that's a big thing going on right now throughout the entire NFL. And we've got, players such as James Conner, just taking out the hashtag "We Want to Play," Vince Williams, more than 20 million Americans tapping into unemployment benefits. I'm thankful to have my job. However, everyone deserves a safe workplace. And then Eric Ebron, we want to play, but not if we're not protected. We want to know that the player's safety is important. At this point, it hasn't been a priority. We report back in a week, some sooner. And that's from Eric. And then Mike Hilton, also adding on, health and safety is most important. We need answers. J.J. Watt, the eldest of the Watt brothers, once again, in interest of keeping everyone, players and fans, as informed as possible. Here's an updated list of what we as players know and don't know as the first group gets set to report to training camp tomorrow. So, it sounds like, players want to play, but they are unified at making sure they're playing in a safe environment. Obviously, that's going to include a lot of testing, and it's going to include accountability and making sure that the teams are paying for players that are missing time because of COVID-19. Because just putting someone on IR means, or just putting someone on the inactive list, what they usually do when somebody gets sick, you're on the inactive list, you don't get paid. This is a unique circumstance, and I understand the players. And if they want to come to try to do this, if they're showing up negative and they catch it, they're catching it from there. So
absolutely,
NFL's got to step up in that respect if they want to have the league.
They have to. I mean, I love this though from the NFL. I love this kind of concerted effort by all these guys, including guys like J.J. Watt. I mean, how huge is he of a figure to speak out and say these things? When you have a guy like J.J. Watt, a perennial All-Pro Defensive Player of the Year kind of guy, stepping up and saying these things, I think that really means something. I mean, before I covered football, I covered MMA, like UFC fighting and stuff like that. And a huge problem that fighters have, they always want to fight for fighter pay, but none of them ever really get anywhere with it. And it's because they're not unified. They don't have a union. They don't stick up for one another. You never see guys like advocating for each other to get more pay or holding out. To see NFL players and top level NFL players like JJ Watt, even, James Conner's a big name for sure locally. To see these guys all stepping forward and using the same hashtag and following the same narrative. I'm sure, there's some direction behind the scenes helping them out with this, but it's cool to see. I like that they're fighting for that. I like that they're refusing to just give in and play without something in place.
Yeah.
It's a super hard challenge, man. The NFL, I understand the NFL is getting a lot of flack for this because everybody's like, oh, they had, X number of months to plan and they still don't have anything. But it's like,
yeah,
the situation's been so fluid. Even if they made a plan and at the end of May, it may not work now. I mean, the situation's been so different that whatever they could have put in place at the end of May, by now, a totally different plan could be necessary. So the plan has been shifting all along as our knowledge of COVID-19 has shifted and as the trends and spikes have shifted. So it would have been hard to put a plan in place anyway long ago because it probably wouldn't hold up right now. So I trust that the NFL will get something together. Dude, there's a part of me, and this is going to blow your mind and probably all the listeners. There's a part of me that would love the NFL to step up and just postpone the season until next year. Just say, listen, we're not infecting anybody. We're not getting anybody hurt, possibly killed. We're going to, because what I've loved about the NFL through all of this is that they've always been the leaders from the draft, from just taking charge and saying, here is our protocol on this. Here is how we're going to handling it. We have our best people on it. If the NFL would step up and just be like, dude, if even one person dies, that's way too many. That's not worth the risk for a game, and we're not going to do it. I would personally be tickled to hear that. And that's crazy because I want football as much as anybody, but I would love to see somebody just take charge because it's getting ridiculous at this point, man. I remember saying back in May on one of our podcasts, I think it was literally on one of our podcasts together, somebody said something like, do you think we're going to have college football or pro football this year? And I said, if we're still talking about that at that time, we have bigger problems. Like if COVID is still rampant at that time, the problem is not sports. The problem is, can we please stop this pandemic?
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about it right now. It's still, it's spiking right now in Allegheny County. It's as bad as it's been in Allegheny County. It's literally getting worse, not better. Like, what are we doing here? Is it worth it? Is it worth it to play a game at this point? And I can't believe I'm asking that question, but that's where I'm at with it right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because like you're saying, we're one of the few countries where it is spiking. I mean, there's no consistency across the board. All the other countries have consistency. Wear your damn masks, wear your damn masks. This country, it's like, there's multiple ways to think about it, though. If you don't wear your mask, this is what happens. And so, on the off chance that they do have a season this year, there is some information that did just come from the league that Albert Breer shared via his Twitter that I'd like to share with everybody here. And here's the full rundown on what the league is trying to do for COVID-19 testing entering training camp. And this came out specifically from the why is this not? Of course, it's not enlarging because technical difficulties now. But the interesting thing about here, there is screening that they want to go on. You're supposed to be screened. I think it's 3 days before you even show up to camp. You show up, you get screened, then you're supposed to be quarantined either at home or in your hotel for those 3 days. You show back up, you get tested. If you're good, you're okay to come on in and start training, and then you get tested. As long as the entire club is under 5% positivity, you're only going to get tested. I think it's once every 72, 3 to 5 days. And then after that point, if you're at 5%, everybody gets tested every day in training camp. So they're trying to really at least have it set so they know exactly who's going to be positive if they move forward with training camp.
Yeah, and that's perfect. That's what it's going to take. I mean, you're going to have to be overly cautious for this to work. Absolutely. And I don't know why this is turning into like me talking about UFC episode, but the UFC is one of the few organizations that's continued to put on events throughout the entire pandemic. The UFC figured out early the way they could quarantine staff and fighters and have testing. And their big thing has been testing everybody. As soon as you show up, wherever the fights may be, you're getting tested like crazy. Your cornermen are getting tested like crazy. Media members are getting tested like crazy. All the staff's getting tested like crazy.
Yeah.
That's just what it's going to take. It's going to be annoying. None of the fighters or managers or anybody likes doing that by any means. And some people have tested positive and gotten pulled off the card. So you're going to have that too. There's going to be a time during this, if there is an NFL season, which, it is looking like there will be, and they'll figure it out. Somebody's going to test positive and not be able to play. Guaranteed. That's going to happen. So plan for that for sure. And that's good though. Ultimately, a positive test is kind of a good thing if they can catch it and quarantine them and get it taken care of versus not catching it. And then they play and end up in a pile, up and infect 5 other players. Then that's an ideal circumstance, but maybe not for your fantasy team.
That's true. So that maybe you got to expand the benches this year for the fantasy teams.
Sure. You need a COVID slot.
So Zachary Herbaugh, one of our sports writers, also reported to us that even though the players are reporting up to the camp, it looks like fans are not going to be at training camp at all. Hines they've come out and stated that specifically no fans at St. Vincent College, but the NFL spokesman Brian McCarthy did state via email that that the clubs may hold up to 2 events at their stadium, provided they adhere to all state and local guidelines. So that's your only chance. And maybe it's a pep rally type thing like the Steelers usually do toward the end of training camp. Obviously we're going to miss Friday Night Lights, which we always love as, Steeler fans, seeing that first hitting practice of training camp, which was always highly attended at St. Vincent's. But one interesting thing that no one's even bothered to talk about, but I'm sure they're probably not going to do, it would be fun to have a practice just streamed. So fans could have a chance to see it. I know that, that's not going to be for every practice. You can't do that because you got people like the Patriots that just like to record everything and they just, utilize that information. But for fans to do like the Friday Night Lights when they're doing the goal line stuff and they're doing the red zone stuff, that stuff's just fun for fans to watch, and it's not really giving away a whole lot. It's just men against men. So that would be something as a fan that I would love to see, and I think that would be the only chance of any of us fans seeing anything from training camp this year.
Man, that's a really cool idea, and I can't believe that I hadn't thought of it or I haven't seen more of that. You've seen I've seen people holding concerts. Trivium held a full concert on stage, streamed it, even sold tickets to, they sold tickets to their live stream. It was awesome. I was cool. Like, this is fantastic. Of course, figure out a creative way to do it. They live stream events all the time. I used to work for a company called Flow Sports, and they stream wrestling, grappling, they stream everything. Why there's even a Flow football. So why could you not stream a practice? You absolutely can. Yeah. But I love the little Patriots name, not naming names, but
but
the Patriots, just saying somebody like that will probably do it. But
that's what happens when we're together. I just think it up on the spot. There we go, Hunter. Thanks for your help.
Of course. Do what we can over here. But man, that would be so fun. And the way streaming technology has come, you could have cameras on linebackers, cameras on receivers, and you could flip between them. You could choose which group you want to watch at a particular time. It would be really cool, man. That would be a really cool experience. It's a lot logistically to pull off, and especially having the bandwidth, the Wi-Fi and everything to pull off. But Steelers could make it happen.
Hey, Dropkick Murphys made it happen at Fenway Stadium too. That was a hell of a show and a fun one too. So it's there. It is possible. So Jordan DeFigio also reported and let us know that the New York Giants game for that Monday Night Football game we're supposed to have, first game of the season, there are going to be no fans at that game should it occur. There was a joint statement. Both of them are getting behind it, stating, we're just not going to have any fans at that first week of the game. And it's starting to show exactly what we were talking about before, and what you were saying is if this is still in the conversation, now we're at the point, we're at the end of July, we pushed this conversation for 2 months, Hunter. Now it's the end of July. It's now we're getting to the point as they've already contracted 2 preseason games. The NFLPA wants them to contract all preseason games. So, we're at a point now where we're just starting to talk about, can we even get this season up and off the ground?
Yeah, it's just crazy whenever you consider all these restrictions. And that's kind of exactly where my mind went. At what point do we say, if we have to do all this, what are we doing? Why are we even doing it if it has to be that watered down and that diluted, that different? But at the same time, What's like the buzzword for this time, right? Is like unprecedented times. And it's unprecedented times, but I've gotten so tired of hearing that. But at the same time, if it's truly unprecedented times, then you have to accept unprecedented solutions. I mean, that's just how it's going to work. So it has to look weird. I mean, it has to look strange and it has to be different. No fans in the stands week 1. Boy, that sucks though, right? That just sucks.
Yeah. And if you're coming to a Steeler game this year, Steelers also reported that masks are mandatory at Heinz Field. Thank you, Justin McGonigal, for providing that information for us on SteelerNation.com. But Steeler fans, we got to get ready for it. So we got to start buying our terrible towel masks, our terrible masks, or with Steeler branded masks, because if we're going to the games, we got to mask up.
I mean, that's good. That's one I'm in favor of. You need to be wearing a mask regardless, especially if you're going to be in a crowd at a football game. And I know the crowd is going to be dispersed and spread out. Social distancing will still be in order and everything. But I hope they make soundproof masks, man, so that you can't hear anybody singing freaking Renegade. That's what I hope.
You're always against Renegade. That's hilarious. So let's start talking about the things that we always love to do on podcasts is arguing basically on things that don't really matter. First thing I want to bring up to you that I'm not even sure if I put it on our outline, but I want to talk about some Madden ratings. Now, Madden ratings is one of the most fun things to talk about because a lot of Steeler fans, Steeler Nation, I know you get triggered on these ratings. I understand it. You know, personally, I don't care because it's a video game, but it is always fun to argue the points on how they were rated, and I want to bring up a couple big ones. Obviously, the highest rated players on the Steelers, we have 2 players that were rated at a 90 or higher. One was David DeCastro at a 91, Cameron Hayward at a 90. Fine ratings. You know, next one rating would be 2 at 87, Minkah Fitzpatrick and Stephon Tuitt. Marcus Pouncey and Juju Smith-Schuster, as well as TJ Watt, were all given Heinz Ward number of 86. Eric Ebron was given an 84, hasn't even played for us yet. Joe Hayden at an 83, and Alejandro Villanueva at 82. Interesting thing, though, and something that a lot of Steeler fans are very upset about is Ben Roethlisberger is not in the top 10. He's not even in... I think he's at 81, I think is his rating, but he's not in the top 10. So
dude, I haven't followed this at all. I'll be honest. I have the Madden, whichever one it is with Antonio Brown on the cover. I have that. I quite literally played it once. And in the 4th quarter of the game that I played, it froze. And I'm like, I'm done with this. I don't need Madden anymore. And that's the last time I've played Madden. So I have not followed along at all, but just from what you've told me, that's absurd. That's absurd. How I don't even know where to start with that. Ben Roethlisberger being an 81 is by far the most absurd part, because I understand like Madden ratings are not necessarily a reflection of how good the player actually is. It's simply they rate them in various categories, and then, you know, there's some algorithm that chugs those numbers in and spits out the overall.
Yeah.
What is Ben Roethlisberger low in that he comes out an 81 overall? Like, I don't understand how you can do that.
The only way I can play this as a devil's advocate is Ben Roethlisberger played a game and a half last season. So yeah, his whole body of work, when you take it into the account of statistics for past season and more interceptions and touchdowns, things like that. Yeah, you down check him a little bit for that. But the issue that CJ Lester brought up on our site is, do you even take stats into consideration when rating players? So now I'm going to have a fun game for you here, Hunter. So, and you guys at Steeler Nation, grab your pen and paper. We're going to play at home. This is a fun one. I'm going to give you 2 players.
Okay.
And we're going to figure out, you know, thank you very much, CJ, too, for really painting the picture, because he really puts the fine point on this argument. So player A has 58 combined tackles, 46 solo, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, 7 passes defensed, 5 interceptions, and no touchdowns. Player B has 69 combined tackles, 44 solo, 2 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, 9 passes defensed, also has 5 interceptions, and 2 touchdowns. So looking at these numbers, which player would you think is the better player? And, you know, to me, looking at the numbers, they're still fairly even. One had 2 touchdowns as opposed to 0 touchdowns. It looks like one had 69 tackles as opposed to 58 tackles. So, and 2 more passes defense, but they're relatively pretty close to each other.
Sure.
So
well, first off, I'm pretty sure I recognize player B's stat line.
Yeah.
I know who that is. So they're comparing him to obviously somebody that I assume is rated higher than him, but actually performed worse. So
go ahead. No, I want you to say who you think it is, because this is the fun part of the game.
Minkah is player B.
You got it.
And he outperformed whoever player A is, who is probably, I don't know, Harrison Smith. I don't know, one of the top safeties.
So he was, Devin McCourty is the highest ranked safety in the game at a 92. Whereas player B is the first team All-Pro, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who has an 87 overall rating is the 7th highest ranking for a free safety.
It's just silly, man. That's just, like you said, do they even consider stats? And one thing I thought of, I saw circulating on Twitter as well, that Gronk was like a 95 overall.
Yeah.
So for your argument about Ben being that he played a game and a half, then what happened with Gronk then? How's he at 95?
Yeah. I mean, but then that's exactly it. He took a year off. The guy's injury prone like a madman. I mean, who knows what he's going to do this year? But Joe Hayden came to Minkah's aid in a tweet, and he says, if Minkah isn't on your top safeties, your football card should be taken immediately.
Dude,
do you watch tape?
No, you don't. You definitely don't. TJ, honestly, in that list you gave me, man, TJ Watt being an 86 might be the most egregious rating of all.
We're going to get to that one. Here's the next game. Player A and player B. Player A, 55 tackles, 35 solo, 14 and a half sacks, 8 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries, 36 quarterback hits, 8 passes defensed, 2 interceptions, and 14 TFLs, tackles for loss. Player B, 47 combined tackles, 40 solo, 8.5 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, 14 quarterback hits, 4 passes defensed, no interceptions, 8 tackles for a loss.
14 quarterback hits versus 36.
Yep.
Think 36 is, when you said that, that's such an absurd number. Think as a quarterback knowing TJ Watt's going to hit me at least twice today. That's going to happen. I'm going to get hit twice by TJ Watt today. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous average. Obviously TJ Watt's stat line last season was just absurd and always easily could have been defensive player of the year in my eyes. I don't necessarily have a problem with him not winning it because he was very solidly in the conversation. You're splitting hairs once you get to that super elite level. So it's all right. He was in the conversation as he should have been.
As defensive player of the year, yep.
Whoever player B is there, I assume it's like Von Miller or Khalil Mack or somebody, one of the big names.
You had it right with your second guess.
There
Khalil Mack. A is obviously TJ Watt. B is Khalil Mack. And like we're saying too, quarterback hits are not sacks.
Right.
So TJ Watt's getting to you 3 times a game because he's sacking you once and he's going to hit you twice.
True. That's absurd.
But Khalil Mack was the highest rated outside linebacker on Madden this year at a 97 overall, whereas they listed TJ Watt as an 86. That's 11 Madden points behind or performance point, whatever it's called, Madden points, whatever.
That's a huge
behind, but that's just absolutely asinine according to CJ Lester, and I agree with you completely, CJ, man. It's just like, how can you be rated 11 points below somebody when you've outperformed them on quarterback hits, tackles for loss, sacks, passes defense, interceptions, and it's not even close.
It's
not even close. Their only thing that's close, and he still has more tackles and more combined tackles, more solo tackles than. Oh no! Actually, Khalil Mack has 5 more solo tackles than TJ Watt. That's the only difference. So evidently, they rate solo tackles as
that's what they care about,
as 2 percentage points each.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would love to hear the Madden developers actually talk about this. I think it's a really interesting conversation. Actually, it's really silly on the surface, but I would honestly love to know what goes into this, because like we're saying throughout this, the McCourty and Minkah is pretty close. Like that one was close, but this one that's a blowout. Like there's no doubt.
Yes.
And I understand maybe body of work plays into it to a degree, and Khalil Mack is obviously an elite edge rusher, but he's not 11 points better than TJ Watt at this stage in his career. I don't think he's better than TJ Watt at all.
I don't think he's better than TJ Watt today.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I just don't. I would love to know what the rating, and I don't know, man. if TJ Watt just not being at least a 90 is just the craziest.
Yeah. One last example for us. One last game to play, Steeler Nation. Hunter, you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Player A, 83 combined tackles, 51 solo, 9 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, 23 quarterback hits, 6 pass defense, and 11 TFLs.
Mm-hmm.
Player B, 56 combined tackles, 37 solo, 6.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, 25 quarterback hits, 1 pass defense, and 10 tackles for a loss.
Ooh.
So do you have an idea on who you think this position is for player A or player B?
Yeah, I think it's Cam Hayward.
You got it.
Is the Steeler involved, but I have no idea who they're comparing. This one's close, though. I'll say when you're going through the numbers, like this one is closer. This is more like McCourty and Minka, where I can probably live with it.
Yeah.
It's not a blowout, but
No.
Cam edges whoever.
Cam's definitely got more tackles, more sacks, which are the 9 sacks to 6.5. He's got less forced fumbles, 1 to 2. Both have the same amount of fumble recoveries and 2 less quarterback hits. He has 5 more passes defense and 1 more TFL. He's got like 30 more tackles than the guy, though. That's the insane thing.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
15 more solos. So, this is what it come down to. Calais Campbell, who's rated as a 95 overall.
What? That's like almost perfect.
Yeah, compared to Cam Hayward's, who's rated at a 90. So once again, it's just a stat disparity for whatever metric they're using. Like, I can understand if a lot of their metrics are speed involved and they say, well, this guy gets to point A to point B. And so like, he's got that kind of explosion. So that stat's a 10, and he's got this type of read recognition. So that stat's a 10. So I understand when you're picking stuff apart, but when you have the whole sum of their parts to be able to get the type of statistics, and you start looking at the differences in players for the statistics that they put out, it's not even close. I mean, it's not, we like you're saying, like they're in the room like, hey guys, I think Leo Mack's is the best linebacker ever.
I know. I really want to know.
95. Man.
I'm like super curious what goes into this, because in these examples specifically, even understanding, like they break it down, okay, speed, strength, whatever, pass rushing. I don't, like I said, I haven't played Madden in so long. I don't even remember what the categories are, but I remember there being categories.
Yes. And it's different for each position too.
Right.
Receivers have like hands and like all sorts of other things in other positions.
Sure. But like the 3 Steelers that we just talked about, TJ, Minka, and Cam Hayward, like, what hole are you poking in their game? Like, what stat did Minka not have that brought him down to an 86? Right? Age? Like, do they? Like, I don't understand that. He's elite. Like, whatever category you want to use, Minka literally has no weaknesses in my eyes from a stats perspective. So, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
And the last thing mentioned, like you mentioned earlier, was Rob Gronkowski was rated as a 95, and that's insane.
Yeah,
absolutely insane.
I tweeted that actually. If Gronk's a 95, then George Kittle needs to be like a 137.
Yep. That's something else. But either way, thank you so much, CJ Lester, for letting us talk about that. And now we move on to what we always love to do, and that's talk about top 10 lists.
The best.
Which is always the most fun to do. So our top 10 list this week comes to us from now I got to find my screen so I can put this up for us too. I downsize everything, so it makes it tough for me to find everything. So here we go. So the top 10 list this week is coming to us from Zachary Herbaugh, SteelerNation.com. And fortunately, we get to talk about the top 10 wide receivers. So
all right, Zach.
Number 10 is already shown there on the board. He listed Plexico Burress as his number 10 receiver. Obviously, the biggest, tallest receiver to ever play. Didn't play his whole career in Pittsburgh, but did get a Super Bowl with the Giants and had a big touchdown catch and was the reason why that team won the game. So, kudos to Plexico there. I always saw him as the shortest 6'5" receiver in the league. I thought he had great size, but he jumped he had like a 2-inch vertical when he jumped. So he was good at attacking the ball. He was a good receiver, very memorable. What are your thoughts on Plexico?
Yeah, man, he was very good. Super high draft pick, and obviously that's always going to come with its own set of expectations and pressure and all of that. So he lived up to it in my eyes. I don't think anybody considers Plaxico a bad draft pick. And in this city, That's a huge win because you know how ruthless Steelers fans can be with their draft picks. So
especially being a first rounder.
So Plaxico lived up to that, which almost says it all. He had like you said, very good career. In my mind, I'm trying to run through who's going to be above him in my mind. 10 feels about right for Plaxico. He would have been higher had he simply played here longer. Definitely.
Yeah.
But obviously you can't count his time with the Giants. So he did come back for that little cameo season towards the end of his career. But
yes.
Yeah.
And then he got hurt. I think he hurt his shoulder.
Yeah.
So he never ended up playing, which sucked. But
yeah,
it's been fun to see Ben throwing bombs to him again.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point too. Plaxico providing, Tommy Maddox providing in that transition phase before Ben a target, a good receiving target. He was very important during that time. So
yes, he was.
Yeah, Plaxico, he's kind of the man. I always liked him.
Good. Number 9 on the list. We've got somebody currently on the team, and this is interesting to me. So this is Juju Smith-Schuster. Obviously, he's got great talent. He had a setback last year, but he's still only 23 years old, entering his 4th year.
Mm-hmm.
So this is some pretty cool stuff. And, I love having Juju on the team. He's another big guy, actually plays big slot as opposed to playing on the edge like Plexico did. But obviously love the guy as a human being. Personally, I think it's a little early to put him on this list, but you're splitting hairs if you're talking about, other receivers, but which I'll talk about later that I think may have been snubbed, but I can't argue with Juju being on this list.
Dude, I like him being on the list. If you're going to put him there, I feel like he has to be 10. You have to just recognize we're putting you on the list because we see the potential in you. And he had the best rookie season ever by a Steelers receiver. So that's something. And then he followed it up with an even better season. Yeah. So no doubt. If you just count those 2 seasons, that puts him in the top 10 Steelers receivers of all time. But you got to see a little more longevity than we have seen from him. And I'm firmly in the camp that Juju is going to be just fine this season moving forward. Whether or not he stays in Pittsburgh beyond, gets re-signed, that's a totally different conversation. But I feel like as far as what he's done on the field so far, definitely a top 10 talent. Now he just needs to go prove it, a little more.
Yep. Number 8 on the list. Some of you probably already saw that because I didn't have my screen set the right size, but Mike Wallace popping on here and he was shot out of a cannon when he first started with the Steelers. I always loved Mike Tomlin's quote of the guy, calling him a one-trick pony. But if your trick is getting open, getting deep, and getting touchdowns, that's a nice trick to have.
It's a decent trick for a receiver to have in their bag, I guess.
Yeah, and he was absolutely killed. He was the shortest person I've ever played our Z position, which is the same position that Plexico Burress played, and that's the guy that's supposed to extend the defense on the right, usually on the right-hand side of the field, and just extend the defense, pull back the safeties. And he's still blowing by everybody, and he was still even that size, even though he was short, he was just blowing by them with speed and getting to the ball and making excellent catches.
He was exactly what they wanted him to be, and he was obviously a very good receiver. As part of that young money crew, him, AB, and Emmanuel Sanders.
Yep.
He was the best one for a stretch. He was for sure the top dog of that group. And they are all, obviously, AB did what AB did, and Emmanuel Sanders did what he did away from Pittsburgh. They were all very good receivers.
Yes, they were.
Mike Wallace was by far the best for a stretch. There was no question about it. So I feel like people maybe forget how good Mike Wallace was because of everything after he left the Steelers. He was never quite that good again.
Yeah.
So it's easy to forget, but man, if you run back that tape, Mike Wallace was a beast.
Yeah, years 2 and 3 for him, he was just undefendable. I mean, it seemed like year 4 he played a little bit more timid. His last year, I guess, because he was going to be a free agent, or I don't know. Sometimes people say that happens to receivers, but it just didn't seem like he was the same player in his last year. He was still productive, but he didn't. He was really fought for those balls in the seasons 2 and 3 after fighting to get on the field his first season, and he was a big part for that big Super Bowl run too for 2010. And as obviously Ben trying to feed him the ball there too, as we were right there at the end of the game to keep the clock going. But, I can't fault Mike Wallace for being on this list because he had all the potential in the world. He really did. And the Steelers offered him the contract first. They're like, we want to make you the longest term Steeler. He's like, nah, that's not enough money for me. So Steelers gave that contract to AB.
Yep.
while he was on the roster. And it's like, that was just like the Steelers saying, hey, you don't want to take that contract, we'll give it to AB. And fortunately, it worked out that way, because if Wallace took that contract, we wouldn't have kept AB.
Yep. That's a great point.
Yeah. So that brings us to number 7 on our list, Santonio Holmes. And I always loved this pick. And it's one of the few times where we moved up in the draft to grab somebody. And that first time that I remember, it was moving up to grab Polamalu. Then a few years later, they moved up to grab Santonio Holmes. And though, Santonio Holmes is not a Hall of Famer, he was a game breaker. Yeah. And I just went back and I watched some Santonio Holmes highlights just to refresh myself. And there were so many plays that he would make that only he could make. I remember him winning the overtime game, which was Cowher's last game in Cincinnati, on that 90-some yard catch in overtime, catch and run to let Cowher walk off the field as a winning coach for his career. And that was, that was an awesome moment. Him winning Super Bowl, the Super Bowl MVP was a great moment. I thought Ben should have been the MVP of that game, but I honestly think that Santonio Holmes was the reason that the Steelers got to the Super Bowl. He had a big play and a big touchdown in every game. I remember that really tight game against Baltimore. Ben is back and trying to run around and scramble. He finds Santonio, who jumps back across the defender to get the ball and then weaves his way 50 yards for a touchdown. Again, and then, we're playing that Baltimore defense. It's impossible to score on that defense. And that play changed the game. And Absolutely. Then next week when they were playing San Diego, he had a huge punt return, ran the punt back for a touchdown, and that changed that game. So San Diego had to be more aggressive, which meant our defense could be more aggressive, and that they just couldn't come back at that point. So kudos to Santonio Holmes. I remember as being a very, very productive guy, super talented, super athletic.
Yeah, I mean, you said everything pretty much that I would have wanted to say about Santonio. Everybody remembers the catch in Super Bowl 43, but that entire drive was Santonio. Yeah. Like, if you watch back the entire drive.
There was one catch that was not Santonio.
Well, there you go. There was one.
Nate Washington had one catch on that drive, but you're right. Santonio Holmes had all of the rest of the catches on that drive, including the touchdown.
He was super clutch. For whatever reason, you always hear about people being clutch players or having the clutch gene, which I still don't really know how I feel about that, but there are guys who show up in big moments, and that was absolutely Santonio. He was very reliable when it mattered. He never had the gaudy, ridiculous stats. He was always very good. And obviously the way his career ended in Pittsburgh was strange. It was very strange, and that left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. But just based on his postseason performance, he's got to be on this list, and 7 feels cool.
And it was interesting because I think we got a 5th round pick when we traded him to the Jets, and that 5th rounder was then used to trade the following year to the Cardinals for Brian McFadden in exchange for their 6th rounder, and that 6th rounder we used to draft Antonio Brown.
That's hilarious.
That's really interesting way that came around and through.
That's awesome.
So next one on the list here at number 6. This is a guy I grew up with. Now, this is my era.
Yeah.
And this is Louis Lips Sinks Ships. Louis Lips was the man on a terrible team. Obviously, I mean, he was the one of the few bright spots. I mean, look at his numbers. He got AP Offensive Player of the Year. He had 358 catches, 6,000 yards, and 39 touchdowns in 6 years. I mean, those are big numbers for back then, especially when it was more of a running game and running attack. And he was fun to watch. He was explosive. And if the Steelers would have actually gotten Dan Marino paired with that guy, I mean, that you wouldn't have even known who Duper and the other guy was. I always forget who the other guy is with Duper, his receivers over there in Miami. But they would have been second fiddle because Louis Lips was legit. He had the legit package. Size, speed, hands, knew how to attack the ball.
You mentioning Lips and Marino teamed up is just unfair. You can't do that. Can't do that to our listeners. But Lips was a guy before my time for sure. I've only seen him on highlights. I understand his game, and I've heard people talk about him, including my dad, letting me know that he, like you said, he was basically the bright spot during that time. Lips was absolutely elite, unquestionably. So the stats show that, the tape shows that. No doubt, one of the best to ever wear the black and gold.
Yes. Number 5 on the list. I know we're going to start getting to some high-known players now. Buddy Dial. This is the old school throw-in. Now, his stats are impressive because you have to take into account that this is a running league. I mean, they only run the football, and they were only playing like 12 games a year.
Yeah.
And he still had multiple seasons, multiple 1,000-yard seasons. That's impossible in that era to do. That's why he was so renowned for his ability and what he did. 4 straight seasons with 40+ catches and over 950 yards, 2 times Pro Bowler. So one of the forgotten players on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's well deserved for being on this list.
Dude, absolutely. I mean, I've been on a different podcast with Chris Carter, Locked On Steelers, and we do like this wide receiver fantasy draft. And I took Buddy Dial in like the 3rd or 4th round, and I was arguing that he was better than Lynn Swann. So I'll
nice.
I'll save that argument because I'm not going to win any fans here with that. But I'm just saying the argument can be made. Like you said, the amount of games they played, the stats he put up, statistically, Buddy Dial was better than Lynn Swann. Like you can't, it's just the numbers bear it out. You can't deny that. Lynn Swann, you'd be surprised. You go back, I know Lynn Swann, obvious Hall of Famer, did all the great things, won all the Super Bowls, made the catches in the Super Bowl. I understand.
Yes.
Nobody's going to question that.
Yes.
But simply statistically, Lynn Swann is super underwhelming when you go back and look.
He has like the lowest statistics of any receiver to make the Hall of Fame.
Yes. And again, like Santonio, would show up when it mattered, and nobody would ever question that. His big play ability, big catch ability, off the charts. But Buddy Dial, as far as being consistent in a time, like you said, whenever receiving was not what it is today by any means. I mean, 1,000-yard season back then was like, you're really doing something.
Yes.
Really doing something.
Yeah,
and Buddy Dial was there or right on the cusp of that multiple times with, the crappy Steelers teams of that time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's awesome. Buddy Dial's career is really, really good. If you're not super familiar with it, highly recommend you go back.
Check him. Read up on him.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Number 4 on the list. I know we're going to be getting to the players that we all know and everybody that's going to be either Hall of Famers or mentioned in the word as being possible Hall of Famers one day. We'll see who number 4 Zach decided to throw on, and it's Antonio Brown.
I'm out. I'm leaving.
Well, I know he's number 1 on your list.
Who wrote this? Wait, which guy wrote this? Who do I need to love?
I think this one's Zach. Hang on a second.
Zach.
Because I don't want to flip up and down. I'll just find it right here. Yeah, Zach. Yeah, Zach.
Zach. I'm going to flame you, Zach. I'm going to flame you on Twitter for sure. This is absurd. Zach, this is absurd, man. No.
Well, here you go. Like, honestly, he's number 2 all time on the Steelers for yardage, touchdowns, and receptions, though, he's got 4 of the top 5 or 4 of the top 6 best seasons ever by a Steelers receiver. He was just undefendable for the period between 2013, 2018, where he had, was it 5 or 6 straight over 100-yard catch seasons. I mean, the guy was just honestly watching Antonio Brown play. And fortunately, I got to grow up in the Louis Lips era because I also watched a butt ton of Jerry Rice.
I was going to say,
wrong Rice, people. Yeah, that's the way my brain works. But Jerry Rice, it was my default playoff team I used to watch because the Pittsburgh didn't make a whole lot of playoffs back then. So I was a big fan of the 49ers back then. Watched a ton of Jerry Rice. But, right now where we're at, Antonio Brown's only peer, in my opinion, was Jerry Rice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, statistically, we've seen so many stats. If you just judge it over, whatever specific period of time, 5-year stretch, AB had the best stretch of all time, including Rice. And I just saw a stat the other day as well that through their first 9 seasons in the league, having at least, 11,000 yards, 800 catches, whatever the numbers were, it was AB, Megatron, and Jerry Rice. Those are the only people to ever do it. And keep in mind, that's with AB barely playing his first season and a half. So AB statistically, complete monster. I mean, what AB did is completely ridiculous. I think if he had a ring and if his time in Pittsburgh didn't end the way it did, obvious number 1. He's an obvious number 1 on this list for me anyway. There's not even a question. To me, AB is one of the top 5 receivers to ever play the game, period.
Yeah.
And I mean, how that's number one in Steelers. Also, there's nobody else even close in the conference. As good as who I assume is number one, as good as Hines is and was. We're not talking about Hines as a top 5 receiver of all time. We're talking about Hines as maybe a Hall of Famer. So, yeah, I don't know about that, man. AB at 4, AB at 4. Zach, you're snubbing Mr. Big Chest here. Put some respect on Ronald Ocean.
That's it. So now we've got to be getting up to the Hall of Famers. So
yep.
It's who you like better, and he's going to list number 3 as Lynn Swann, the guy that we were talking about. Obviously, biggest benefit of the televised football era. He was, he also did ballet, and he looked like a master ballet artist in the air, jumping, catching, twisting his body in ways that only he could come down with those footballs. And man, was it beautiful to watch, especially like you were stating earlier on the biggest stages. The levitation catch against the Dallas Cowboys is one that is etched in all of the Steelers fandom. You see that highlight all the time. A beautiful, beautiful grab. And then he had that monster game also where I think he had on 4 catches. It was like 140 yards and 2 touchdowns to be the MVP of the one game that he was the MVP of. But what a phenomenal talent
He
that
truly
the Steelers
was.
have.
Yep. And I don't want people to think I don't like Lynn Swann or something. Like, there's no doubt he's a Hall of Famer and he's on this list. He's a Steelers legend, no doubt. But putting him above AB and even for me, Buddy Dial, just feels a little weird, just statistically. I mean, he had a short career too. That's one thing about Swann as well. He didn't really play that long. Like you said, I mean, the big plays, they don't win Super Bowls without Lynn Swann. He was absolutely a clutch part of that, a necessary part of that, which matters. I'm not saying that doesn't matter by any means. He won bigger things than AB ever did or ever will. So there's that too.
That is true. So now we get to number 2 all time on the list, and that should be, well, we'll see who it is. John Stallworth. There we go. That's the guy. I mean, they were both drafted the same year, 2 Hall of Famers in the same year in that epic Hall of Fame draft, also getting Lambert, also getting Webster, also getting dude that they just put in this year as an undrafted rookie free agent. Who's the safety that's just
Donnie
coming in?
Shell.
Donnie Shell. My gosh, brain fart. Hell of a draft. 2 great wide receivers. John Stallworth obviously had all of the Steelers records until this new era where they kind of opened up the football and passing game a little bit more. But hell of a talent, always reliable, always making the tough catches, and just never seemed to drop a ball or make a mistake.
Oh, man, John Stallworth, for me, is everything that Lynn Swann wasn't. And again, I'm not trying to just make this the rip on Lynn Swann episode, but he had the longevity, the consistency. Everything about John Stallworth was exactly what those Steelers teams needed. Just consistent yardage, production. He was there. He was Mr. Reliable. He was tough. He played forever, had a very long career. I actually got the chance to talk to John Stallworth last year during the Rams home game. They had a lot of the old Steelers players there in celebration of that winning 75 team. John Stallworth was awesome to talk to, man. And I asked him about some of his records getting surpassed by Hines and AB and how he felt about that. He kind of smirked, smiled, and said, how much the game's changed and things like that. But he's very proud of his records, no doubt, very proud of what he did, feels a certain way about it. And they're all well earned. I mean, there's a case to be made that John Stallworth is the best receiver in Steelers history when you adjust for how the game changed. So he definitely has a point there, how much they throw the ball now, threw the ball to Hines and AB. Stallworth, though, for me, everybody says, this article even says that if there was 2A and 2B, it'd be Stallworth and Swann. For me, man, Stallworth is a clear tier above Swann.
I'm with you there. Absolutely with you there, especially since they played in the same area together. And that brings to the number 1, which for me, I think it's going to be my all-time favorite receiver, me being a receiver, me loving receivers. This guy just epitomized not only everything it is to be a receiver, but to be a receiver in the city of Pittsburgh. And that is number 1, Hines Ward. For him, we knew he was a great receiver. Like, he started off, actually, the Steelers weren't even giving him a chance to be the receiver. He was kind of like, they got him in the 3rd round. They knew he was an athletic quarterback and slot guy and slot back. and receiver down there in Georgia. And then they brought him in, and he played a ton of special teams because the guy was a monster and loves to hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just started getting on the field, and he started performing well. But then they kept drafting guys. They're like, okay, well, let's get Troy Edwards because we don't have any receivers.
Yeah.
And then Troy Edwards, like he ended up being a bad first-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ended up getting Plexico Burress not long after that too. But they were always trying to draft the receivers without knowing that Hines Ward was the guy. But by year 3, Hines Ward was like, I'm the guy.
Yeah.
And first off, when he was getting on the field and just decleating people in the running game, because that was the biggest. When the Steelers started off with Hines Ward, they were a running attack game. It was with Bettis. They were 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and Hines was making all of the tough catches on third downs to extend drives, extend chains, and to get them in the end zone, man. Because he's the all-time leader in receptions, 1,000 for the Steelers. 12,000 receiving yardage and 85 touchdowns. I mean, that's saying a lot. Those are, Hall of Fame minimum numbers, in my opinion. Once you get over the Mendoza line for 1,000 catches and 10,000 receiving yards,
yep,
you got to be in a conversation.
Yeah, man, I definitely agree. And I think very much like John Stallworth, Hines Ward did a lot of stuff that was underappreciated. Everybody knows about his blocking, obviously, so I'm not necessarily talking about that, but more so talking about the consistency. I think people underestimate how hard it is to succeed at the NFL level and succeed year over year consistently the way that he did, never being flashy. Hines was not a flashy guy. His blocks, I'm sure his highlights are more blocks than huge catches. The catch in the Super Bowl, of course, notwithstanding. And I'm not saying that Hines didn't make clutch catches, but he wasn't Lynn Swann. He doesn't pop off the film like, oh my God, how did Hines Ward do that? He was just always there, always reliable, very John Stallworth in that way. Dude, nobody doesn't love Hines that loves the Steelers. The smiling, the attitude, he would decleat you and smile about it. He would get popped and smile about it. Like, he's probably right there. He's probably smiling on the way down. I think he was. I think he was like, that's completely ridiculous. He was just, he was so tough, so reliable, so much, like you said, embodied Pittsburgh, the city, which nobody loves that more than Pittsburghers. Just a tough dude that you could rely upon.
Yeah.
Listen, I still do think AB is clearly a better receiver than Hines Ward,
but
I can understand putting Hines above AB, but I cannot, Zach, see AB any lower than number 2.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with your argument there. I think just as in what they are now, I think AB and Hines would have been able to compete with those 70 teams and play in the 70s. But I also think that Swann and Stallworth could compete and play in the wide open era that we're at now. I see that's like because they were super athletic guys back when, Steelers were just, when teams were just drafting receivers to be like an extension blocker and maybe get a couple balls thrown their way a game.
Yeah.
So
Hines he was more athletic, I think, than most people remember. There was a clip of him hurdling a player, looked like a Broncos.
Right here.
he was literally smiling midair the entire time, just smiling away. But like you said, he was a fantastic special teamer and definitely had more athleticism than he's remembered for, especially towards the end of his career. He became more just kind of that reliable third down catch, move the chains kind of guy. But he was a game breaker earlier on. And there's that, of course.
Yes. This is what you know him for. It's he changed the game, and the fact that they had to make a new rule because of it, because he was hitting players too hard on crackbacks after interceptions, that he was killing people, and even on blocking plays. So this guy changed the game in that respect, that when he went out on the field and we were at our biggest high point of the Ravens-Steelers rivalry, they were talking their dominant defense, toughest defense in the league, was talking about our wide receiver. And had their head on a swivel because of a wide receiver, which opened up the running lanes, which opened up passing lanes. And then when he hit you, he decleated you. He made you look foolish. He wrecked Sharper, and he wrecked Ed Reed. He came and hits Ray Lewis a few times pretty well too. But I mean, just highlight reels of him just really, really making huge hits on Hall of Fame defenders that now are complaining about how difficult it is to play against this overly aggressive wide receiver, which is something you never hear in the game.
Oh, absolutely, man. I highly recommend anybody watching this who hasn't seen it. There's a video on YouTube of Hines Ward and Ed Reed recently riding around in a car and just talking about their careers. It's really cool to hear them talk shop and that mutual respect
Yeah.
they had for one another. And it's a cool insight into the competitor's mind and who Hines Ward was as a competitor. You know, he was consistently voted one of the dirtiest players in the league, which to some players would be that's a huge compliment because
Badge of courage.
if you play within the rules, if they think you're dirty, all that means is this dude is playing super hard and hurting me. That's what that means. So,
and I got to show you my jersey now.
There you go.
Put on mine.
There you go. Don't leave me hanging. You've got to tie it in. It looks like a Super Bowl jersey too. Look at that. Signed. Oh man.
I was lucky enough to have him sign it at training camp the one time, just me showing up as a fan. This is way before my Steeler Nation days of reporting and podcasting and all that. But man, is he just a cool guy and just embodies that hard-nosed work ethic of what it is to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. And we as fans, I know, love him because of it.
That's killer, man. That's really cool. That's a cool little listen, putting Hines number 1 on the list, I certainly don't have any problems with that. I was, you know, somewhat playing up the AB stuff, even though I definitely feel and even Zach probably agrees talent-wise, he was the best, unquestionably. 2 names I want to throw in just for fun. See how
good. Because I wanted to talk about something.
There you go.
Great.
You're probably going to go more old school on me, just given our generations. But the guy, this is a ridiculous pick. I'm going to just let you guys know. But Martavis Bryant. Wow. I know. One of the most talented receivers I've ever seen play the game. If he could have simply got his head on straight, seen the field, I have no question he would be on this list. The dude was an absolute game breaker.
Absolute athlete. And unfortunately, he liked recreational marijuana a little bit more than playing football. And that's taken, Josh Gordon, another talent, who that Hall of Fame level talent that had his career, severely hamstrung because of the substance abuse rules in the NFL for the love of marijuana. So
a defense dealing with Martavis and AB and Le'Veon Bell, that was truly, the Killer Bees were pretty unfair. And it's a shame. One of the great injustices of being a Steelers fan is never seeing them on the field together for a prolonged period of time. That's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But the second name that I'll throw in doesn't deserve to be on the list right now, but Deontay Johnson will be on that list.
Oh, that's a good call. I mean, I love Deontay Johnson's game. I hope he makes this list one day. I'm going the other way. We mentioned this guy a little earlier. It's still a guy that you know too, but probably got downgraded just for the fact that he didn't finish his season or finish his career and play as much as a Pittsburgh Steeler. And that's Emmanuel Sanders.
Oh yeah.
The guy's a phenomenal receiver. And to get those receivers, they got Emmanuel Sanders and Brown in the same draft.
Mm-hmm.
So Emmanuel Sanders, I think, was like 2nd or 3rd round. And then they picked up Brown in the 6th.
Yeah.
So that's just phenomenal talent. If they would have been able to keep the Young Money crew together longer, I think that they probably could have gotten a Super Bowl together. But, finances, everybody needs to make money. Young Money's got to start making big money.
Exactly.
They went for greener pastures, and that's the way it goes sometimes, man.
The coolest thing about those guys was it started to represent kind of that philosophy shift too, and the kind of receivers they were looking for. Mike Wallace, not so much. Mike Wallace was absolutely a burner, game breaker, but Emmanuel Sanders and AB both played that very precise route running, possession based game. And then being quick and shifty with the ball in their hands, which is Deontay Johnson.
Deontay Johnson, exactly. Yeah.
So I just love seeing the trends in the NFL, the kind of receivers you're looking for. And then funny enough, they go right back to Chase Claypool this year, which is the huge, fast, mega athlete. So it's funny to see them break the mold now the other way. Maybe they feel they have enough Deontay Johnsons on the team. And now, let's going to supplement it with a little size and speed.
Yeah. One other player I have to mention, and this isn't, you're pretty young when this guy was playing, but Yancey Thigpen is a guy that at least needs to be mentioned because he was the main receiver when the Steelers made the Super Bowl in 95. He was also that transition player that they had as a receiver to help out a young Cordell Stewart find his way, and really was the safety valve for a not super accurate Cordell Stewart, but Yancey just kept making plays for him.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved Yancey Thigpen as a receiver. And I didn't get that hole in my heart fixed until Hines Ward became a receiver. So that was the biggest change for me. But I loved me some Yancey. Had some good years also with Tennessee after he left, or the Oilers. They might have been the Houston Oilers back then. I forget. But it was at the Oilers. And but he was a hell of a receiver. And I would honestly have him in the top 10, probably over Plexco, probably over Juju at this point. But that's for me personally, getting to watch him in his career.
Yeah. Well, you'll like this, man. That's funny if you're a Yancey guy. My sister lives down in Charlotte, North Carolina, right outside Huntersville, North Carolina. And we were down visiting her maybe 2 summers ago. We were getting an Uber to go somewhere. Our Uber driver picked us up. We were just making small talk with her. And she, where are you guys from? And I said, we're from Pittsburgh, just down here visiting my sister. She lives down this area. And she said, oh, are you a Steelers fan? And I said, yeah, I love the Steelers. Grew up watching the Steelers, everything. She said, do you know Yancey Thigpen? And I said, well, yeah, I know Yancey Thigpen. Like, he was a little before my time, but I definitely know who he is. I've done my homework. I definitely know the name. And she goes, well, I'm his sister. Wow. And I was like, what? Yancey Thigpen's sister apparently drives Uber in North Carolina and picked us up and drove us. So we talked about Steelers and Yancey stories from there. So yeah, it was really cool to hear.
That's awesome. Yeah, just a great guy. But Hunter, once again, man, anytime we get together, time flies. We have a blast.
Yeah.
Always fun to talk top 10. Always fun to talk Steelers with you. And so, I know we'll be seeing you real soon. Steeler Nation, reach out to him. Check out his website right there. If you're in the vidcast, you can see it over his right shoulder. Hunter Homistek at homistek.com. That's HOMISTEK.com. Twitter and Instagram at Hunter A. Homistek. And Hunter, like we said, anytime you are welcome on our show, man. We love having you.
For sure, dude. Let's run it back very soon. Maybe I'll bust out a different jersey next time. I gotta go let Zach know that he messed up that list, though. I gotta get on that.
Here we go. It's gonna be fun. And I found an SI article too with the top 10 list that they did last year on Steeler receivers, which is also a really, really good list. But I think they put your boy at number 2 on that.
There we go. That's better.
And they remembered Yancey in that one too. So
nice. All right.
All right, guys. So we'll see you real soon then, Hunter. Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
Yep. And Steeler Nation, make sure to come on over to SteelerNation.com for the best football forum and Steelers news on the internet. Tweet us at Steeler Nation. Instagram us at SteelerNation.com. Thank you for joining us on the SteelerNation.com podcast, sponsored by no one, because we don't have a sponsor right now. This is an old copy. This is great. But I am your host, G.Stryker, with Hunter Homistek, rooting along with you as always. Go